guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to do another old art review for you guys. I've got this old piece that I really loved when I made it, and it's even part of my streaming setup right now. I have an animation of it as my starting soon screen, but it's sort of one of my first experiments with some really detailed backgrounds, as well as using the blur effect, the Gaussian blur, to show a bit of perspective, show things that are further away from the camera being fuzzier and blurrier than things that are closer to the camera. And I figured, since I've already put out a couple videos of me using that technique with my art now, I wanted to show you one of the first instances of me attempting it. I think it turned out really well. It was really nice at the time. I still think it holds up really nicely. My only gripe with it now is I can definitely see a lot of anatomy issues and a lot of mistakes were made that I wouldn't make as an artist now, but I'm still really happy with it. I'm going to be changing it on my stream. I'm working on another starting soon screen right now, but I will still be including it in a lot of my portfolio work for a good while to come. I do still really enjoy it. So without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and hit play on the speed draw and we can chat about it as we watch. All right, so as we can see kind of right off the bat, I am putting in a lot of effort into what is going to be a very detailed background. I really wanted to try and get a little bit of like an upward angle so that it looked like the character was looking down on you. And I think I achieved that with the background, but not so much with the character. This was also in my hands reaching out era. I want to say like 4 or 5 pieces in a row where all the characters were reaching out towards the camera in some way. I'll flash them up here to sort of give you an example. But first mistake I think I kind of made here was the anatomy of the face. One eye is definitely a lot larger than the other one, and the eyes I think are just too big in general. I did love this hair that I gave her, and this is actually a character that I do still constantly draw. Her name is Kira, and I've tweaked her design a little bit since this, but she does still pretty much look the same. That sleeve on the bottom there, I really didn't know what I was doing with it at first, and I do end up going back much later, like after the line art is almost finished, and doing a little bit of motion in the sleeve so it looks like her hand is sweeping towards you and not just sticking out waiting for you to grab it or something. I also made the noses like really small in this time period. I hadn't quite figured out how to draw noses yet, so I was kind of making them as small as possible so that you didn't notice how undetailed and just kind of sloppy they were. Something else that always has really bothered me about this painting is the eyelashes on her left eye are sticking upwards, whereas the eyelashes on her right eye are kind of lowered. Like there's none sticking up. It's a very subtle issue, but it is something that I notice because I stare at this screen a lot when I start streaming. We still got that nice line art though. My line art technique hasn't really changed that much. At least since this drawing, my line art hasn't really changed. I definitely remember having really monotone line art when I was younger. I didn't understand line weight and heaviness and how they added interest to a piece. But you can definitely see in some of my more recent work, starting especially with this era. This was about, I want to say like 2 years ago, 2021 is when I made this. It must have been early 2021 though. But I'm definitely starting to experiment a lot at this point with really heavy line art and a lot of line weight to give some interest, some intrigue to my characters. That stupid belt in the middle, I don't know why I included it. Well, I do know why. I wanted something to sort of break up the stripes in the center. In the final piece, I just don't think it looks that good, especially because it's just a loose belt that doesn't serve any sort of purpose. So it kind of just sticks out a little bit. This is also, I was thinking I was getting better at doing fabric, but honestly, it didn't really click for me until I started actually referencing fabric instead of just trying to freehand it, which is what I'm doing here. It looks okay, but I think especially the draping on the fabric that's coming down in the halter top looks really off. It doesn't feel like it's laying the correct way. Going in with the coloring here, as always, outlining the whole piece first and then just filling it in. Do I use the same blush technique? Oh, I'm doing the hair before I did the blush. That's interesting. Nowadays I will do like skin and then blush, and then I'll do the hair on top of that just to make sure that everything's kind of cohesive. Looks like I'm doing the blush after the hair though. That's not really a huge deal. It's just a change in what I normally do. That's interesting. So when I do blush now on a character, it's usually kind of sloppy. It's very big, not even on the cheeks, but like around the temples of the character. and then I'll do a swipe across the bridge of the nose and then underneath the nose as well. And then I'll go on to the lips, the chin, the neck, and the ears and stuff like that. But I'm definitely missing that swipe across. That's something I must have picked up later. And I definitely didn't go as heavy with the blush on this character. When I do blush on my characters nowadays, it's definitely very, very bright and very pigmented. And the reason that I do that is because I've found that when you're drawing on a white background, things tend to look more saturated than they are, because in comparison to the white background where there is no color, there's no saturation, they are very saturated. But once you get the background and all the rest of the colors kind of filled in, then the blush doesn't look as heavy as it did when you were coloring it in. So that's why I tend to go, especially with the blush, a little bit heavier, a little bit more saturated, so that when everything else is colored in, it still shows through very noticeably. The colors were all over the place on this one too. I specifically remember just laying down a lot of very basic colors. So like I'm doing the beige and the kind of bluish purple sleeves because I didn't know what kind of vibe I wanted to go for with this. In the end, it ended up being very pinky purple, but at this point I didn't know that that was the feel that I was going for, so I was blocking in a lot of color and then figuring I would change it later. I still do that now to some extent. To be honest, it generally doesn't bode well for the final piece in my experience. Whenever I use this technique of just throwing down any random color and fixing it later, the final piece looks like a mess. Yeah, this corset was a huge mistake. Just everything about it. I couldn't decide on what I wanted the colors to be. The vertical stripes with the horizontal belt going across it looked very staged, very forced. There wasn't any purpose to it. And I think the colors just didn't quite match with the rest of the piece. There I go, kind of adjusting all the colors. You'll notice, by the way, that I have not yet changed that sleeve. There I go. I got way, all the way past the line art and into the coloring before I realized just how horrible that looked. The snapping hand, her left hand, that's another one that definitely has some anatomy issues for me. Something about it just doesn't look right. I think the knuckles are kind of like weirdly placed. Hands are hard to draw, so I'll give myself a little leniency on that, but it just looks a little strange. And the fact that her pinky is not showing at all, yeah, looks weird. Doing all this cell shading. Again, not much has changed. I've definitely gotten faster at this process. And I think that's because I put less detail into it. Because look at this, I'm just doing each individual strand, placing every single one. Great end result, but it takes ages. I also know I didn't have my hair highlighting technique down at this point, so for the highlights for this one, I was kind of experimenting a bit, and you'll definitely see that when we get to it, but I think I ended up doing like a really fuzzy, glowy highlight on the hair instead of the usual like sleek H highlights that I usually do. Still shading this hair. This is why my pieces took so long back then, is because I was so focused on the teeny tiny details. It just took me hours to complete them. Just going in with the rest here. I remember wanting a little bit of a glow from the necklace, like the gem that she had, and I don't think that quite came across in the finished piece. I think the reason it didn't look as glowy as I wanted it to is because I end up making the background very glowy. There's that big glass ceiling sort of atrium that I put like a sunset behind, and that's very bright, very glowy, and I think it took away from the glowiness of the necklace that I wanted to achieve. I was very proud of this hand. This hand reaching out, I think I would do it differently nowadays, but at the time, I was super proud of it, and I still think it looks really good. I think the shading, the cell shading for the lines of the palm really worked out well. Oh, this corset, I hate it. I kept changing it. Flipping over to Photoshop here because at the time I was using PaintTool Psi, which does not have great tools for geometrical shapes. I'm currently using Psi 2 now. Also doesn't have great tools for geometrical shapes. And specifically the reason I switched to Photoshop for this was because I wanted everything to be very symmetrical. So the column in the center there, I wanted it to match on either side. And then the windows especially, I wanted to be able to make sure that they matched up really nicely and also sort of adjust them a bit as I'm doing here with the sort of warp tool. The warping didn't turn out quite the way I wanted it to. I definitely struggled with it a lot. Nowadays, I would just kind of sketch that in and say that's good because I know in my brain I'm gonna be blurring it out for the most part later, so you're not gonna see all the mistakes. Doing this lovely ceiling. I actually had a great time doing this background. When I really focus on doing a background, it's quite enjoyable actually. I really, really love doing these big architectural scenes. It's just getting into the right headspace of like, I need to draw a background. I'm going to draw a background now. I also love these little griffins that I put way too much detail into because especially the back one, you don't see any of it in the finished piece. It is completely obscured, and I put so much work and effort into the wings, especially because what I wanted this character to have were these like big extended wings poking out from behind her, so it kind of looked like they belonged to her. I'm not sure if that comes across in the final piece. It's definitely something where if you stare at it really intently, you can, oh, it's there, you can kind of see it, but it's not the first thing that pops out at you, which is what I wanted it to be. Going in with the wings there and just copying them on the other side. And again, I think it's the pose of the character. I think it's because the wings aren't big enough. You just can't really see them back there, especially when I go in and blur everything out. And here's where we're getting those lovely pinks and purples and reds and sunset colors. This is when the piece like really started coming together for me. I was super, super happy with the colors of the sunset specifically. And just having that coming through the atrium roof and the sort of glow behind her of the sunlight. She's sort of supposed to be blocking the sun a little bit. So it comes out in like a glow, a ray behind her. And I thought that turned out really, really cool. I would like to attempt something like this again. Look at all this detail I'm putting into the griffin that is just gonna be blurred out later. I would like to attempt something like this again with that backlight glow. I always love doing a good backlighting. And especially with these colors. I was really, really happy mostly with the colors of this piece. I think they turned out so cool. Still just detailing that griffin that's going to be completely obscured after we're finished. Onto the other one. Luckily not as much detail because you can't see as much of it. I think her hand is kind of blocking most of it. I'm also doing the same thing with the griffins that I just told you I don't like doing anymore, where I blocked them in with a solid gray color and I figured I would change the hue of that color a little bit later. It ended up working out in the end because they do match the background really nicely. And in fact, this whole piece, I just love the colors on it, even though I did do that color shifting technique that I don't like doing anymore. But I think with this piece specifically, it did work out really well. I had this weird issue where when I mirrored it, I got some like weird line art on the other side. Still don't quite know what happened, but I just went in and erased it very painstakingly because the layers were merged and I didn't realize until far too late, but live and learn. See, now we can see what I was talking about with the skin and the blush specifically. Her skin looks so pale when before it looked a lot darker because it was against the white background. Now that we're against this darker purple and red background, her skin looks white and the blush is almost non-existent. I don't think I tweak it, but I do add a shadow to the front of her that sort of darkens and evens everything out. So it works out in the end. Oh, I loved doing these clouds. One of my favorite things to do with background specifically is draw clouds. These sort of like sunset clouds with the highlight on the bottom of them, I just love them so much. They look so, so cool. So I was very happy I got to do that. Going in here with some soft shading now, it looks like. Boy, really, really getting into the details on this one. And it looks like I'm taking into account the backlighting when I'm doing the soft shading by erasing the edges so that the highlights can come through. I still do this technique for shading like really, really detailed fabric is I'll color in the whole piece and then I'll erase the parts that I don't want to be shaded. So for example, on these ones, anywhere the wrinkles are really deep is going to be the more shaded part because they're condensed closer together, they're blocking light. And then where the fabric is more spread apart, more flowy, I erase those areas to have less shadow on them. I still use this technique now, definitely not as much. It's only for like really, really dramatic pieces, which I wanted these sleeves to be very dramatic, very flowing. Same technique used for the dress here. Again, just filling in the whole piece with the shading layer and then erasing the parts in the middle that I don't want to be shaded. Getting very, very detailed with the hair once again. I definitely don't go this detailed anymore, especially with the soft shading. I just kind of brush it on very, very lightly, and it does the trick. You really don't have to be this detailed, but I was a very detailed-oriented person back then, and I was not producing art as quickly, which is a good thing and a bad thing, I think. Consumerism is killing the art world. Social media has destroyed the art community in the sense that people want things perfect and they want things quick. And that is very, very difficult to do. Most of my pieces, you guys don't see it because obviously these speed draws are sped up astronomically, but I just spent like 14 hours on, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in the last video, but that concept art video of my monster characters, I spent 14 real life hours drawing that. I'm not sure how long I spent for this one because I don't have the raw footage readily available. I just have this edited piece that I saved a long time ago, but I'm sure it was up there, especially with the level of detail in the background. Now the soft shading on the face, this is definitely something that I was not loving. I didn't even love it at the time. Look at how rough that is. And then looking back on it now, I think the shading in the face is my least favorite part of it. It just doesn't look like something that I would do nowadays. And honestly, I think even at the time, it didn't really look like my art. This shading is just very, very intense. Oh, here we go with the hair highlights. Trying a new technique here because I still didn't know how to highlight hair consistently. Every time I would do a new piece, I would bring out this new technique that I was trying until I finally found the little H hair highlights that I like doing. And now that's my go-to. Yeah, we're just sort of blurring them in and then erasing the top part of it to kind of make it look sleek, I guess. Yeah, I think the biggest flaw with this one is I definitely went overboard with the shading. Oh, putting little streaks in there. Oh, taking them away. Putting them back? Yeah, I think that's sort of the finish. So it looks a little bit more glossy. Oh, now I gotta go in and color the rest of the background. And now we're doing just some fun backlighting techniques. You can tell, of course, I've already darkened the background, put a shadow over that, and then I put a shadow over the character as well and just sort of erased around her outline to look like it was backlit. It worked very well. Again, this is a piece that I still really, really love, even though I see so many flaws in it now that I am a little bit more experienced. This, I want to say, is one of my masterpieces, at least at the time. I was so happy with the final product of this. Look at how messy this background is, though, without the character sort of blocking it all off. Because of course I'm not going to color in pieces of the background that the character is going to be blocking. That would just be a waste of time. But it's so funny seeing the background without the character to block off all the unfinished bits. Let's see, we're going in with... Oh, I think we're doing the erasing here. So I've done the whole shadow over the character, which has made her skin look a lot darker. And now we're going in with that beautiful backlighting. It just frames the character and makes it so beautiful. Absolutely love it. Highly recommend backlighting and rim lighting for just anything, absolutely anything you draw. Just throw a rim light on it. It makes it look so much better. Oh my goodness, going into the hair again, doing all these details. I tried so hard to make these sleeves look transparent, and I think I did a really good job of it, especially with the highlighting where I was doing rim lighting over the arm and the fabric as well to make them look cohesive. More rim lighting, just everywhere, just everywhere. Oh, it makes your piece look so good. Oh, here we go. Okay, we're getting in with the little red glow from underneath. I think it adds a nice bit of warmth to the piece that it's desperately needing. Especially because the background is just a little bit cooler. I just wish there was more. I wish there was a little more of that warm red glow in there. Just doing some adjustments. We've gone back to Photoshop because, again, PaintTool Sci, the original one, I don't think it had a blur feature. Sci 2 does, the one that I use now, but PaintTool Sci does not. I want to say at this point too, the reason I don't use Photoshop to begin with is because it's too big. It is too big and it is too complicated of a program, and it is just so frustrating to me. Whereas Sci is very simple, very user-friendly. I much prefer to do as much as I can in Sci, and if I need a tool that only Photoshop can provide, I'll go ahead and hop over there to make any necessary adjustments. And of course, this is the part where I am just collapsing all the background layers. I'm adding Gaussian blur on everything to make the character herself stand out, and that's about it. That's the finished piece. Ooh, look at this lovely little reveal that I've done. Again, this is old footage that I edited together a while ago. It had a voiceover on it already, but it was from ages and ages ago. I didn't even listen to it. I just decided to scrap it and start over. But look at this beautiful little edited reveal that I did. All right, let's skip to the finished piece. All right, so that was my review of this old piece that I did back in 2021. The piece itself, I think, is called Vampirus, which looks fine when it's written out, but is so hard to say. It sounds so awkward. Anyway, I love this piece. Even though I am a very harsh critic of my previous work, I'm super, super happy with how this piece turned out back when I first created it, and even now, I still am so, so happy with it. So, with that being said, you can find this full piece quite a ways back on my Instagram. That's why I'm leaving it up here for right now, because it's kind of hard to find otherwise. It's buried. I did it a very long time ago. But if you want to see other more recent pieces that I've created, you can find those on my Instagram. I'm taking a little break from it right now, but I will be back to posting regularly in March. If you want to find me on my other socials, I also stream on Twitch, where you can see this lovely lady as my starting soon screen. I am also on Patreon. If you want to stop by and give me a little bit of support there, that means the absolute world to me. You can also find my Discord server there as well. I have a TikTok. That's all I have to say about that. Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, Patreon. So yeah, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch, and Patreon are all my socials that you can find me on. I am Threadwing under all of those, spelled here. And make sure you guys subscribe so you can find your way back here for next week's video. I love you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye!